What do you secretly struggle with that no one knows about?
Bloody hell. Yeah, actually, I've had, let's be candid about this. I've had 2 bouts of anxiety and depression. I still have low-level anxiety quite a lot of the time. It's not all the time. I don't want to claim. But I don't wish that on anybody, having had, it's, and I lucked out by basically, through a minimal intervention, managed to get out of it slowly. And you probably, by the way, to anybody suffering with that, you probably will, okay? But my God, that's, one of the things I would say, and there are various people who've made this point, is the, whatever we talk about wokeness, people being too fragile, blah, 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 all of which is by the way, an interesting line of debate and may often be true. Because actually, some evidence suggests that the most successful analysts or the best people to have as a kind of psychiatric treatment is someone who gives you a bit of tough love. Okay, so we got to be careful here. But the fact that we spent far too much money on physical health relative to mental health, and Paul Dolan, LSE guy, I've mentioned him before, wonderful guy. He made the point that some physical conditions are not attention-seeking. In other words, it hurts when I do this. Okay? The point about things like depression and anxiety is there's nothing you can do to make it go away. There's nothing you can avoid to make it go away. It will creep up on you at an unexpected moment, okay? And consequently, Dolan's point was that the measure of how bad is this is slightly artificial, because how bad is my knee when it hurts? People think, how bad is my knee when it is actually hurting? Which is not all the time necessarily, okay? So that measure might be a 9 in terms of unpleasantness, relative to something like depression, where of course you have no control over whether it stays or whether it goes away. You lose autonomy over any kind of autonomy over your own mood, which is a terrifying thing to happen to anybody. So I have wrestled with that. I mercifully, for 15 years, I've had no significant sort of return. Don't wish that on anybody.
You were almost inconsequentially and accidentally thrust into fame. If you could reverse it, would you?
No, because I'm 59. The one thing I've said to quite a few people is that when you hear people aged 20 who are like rock stars or whatever complain about it, most of us go, yeah, right, no, I'd give anything to have your problems. Actually, no. I've had 30 years, 40 years of relative adult anonymity, okay? Being a bit famous at 59, I can kind of cope with, okay? However, those people who are famous all their lives, oddly, I now understand I feel your pain, because I've had enough anonymity to actually, and by the way, I ought to make the point, the level of fame I have is at a highly agreeable level, where if I walk through a railway station, someone will say hello, ask for a selfie. One person, maybe 2, okay? That's totally manageable. I don't need an entourage, okay? I don't need security. Okay, that would be totally delusional, okay? And so it's at a very, very manageable level where it does, it's not that Elvis level where, effectively, you can't live a normal life anymore.
You can get like a pasty at a BP garage.
And a very interesting one, by the way, is Jeremy Clarkson. There was I had a friend who went on holiday with Jeremy, brilliant advertising guy who lived near him in Oxfordshire. Jeremy Clarkson has to go on holiday in France because it's the only place where they didn't broadcast Top Gear, okay? And so what's weird is he can go through France basically as just this random English guy. And then my friend who drove down, I think, they got to Pau with Jeremy Clarkson, and suddenly there was a coachload of Dutch school children, and of course he's totally mobbed. But I sympathise completely in the sense that I've had enough anonymity. I can cope with a little bit of recognition. The big downside is you can't behave like a total cunt because it'll get back to somebody. That is, by the way, an interesting component, which is you can't, you couldn't lose your rag with someone in a restaurant, on a plane, or anything like that. So, in a weird way, that argument I have, which is that fame makes brands nicer businesses because they have reputational skin in the game, and the consequences of bad behaviour are amplified. Okay, if you think about it, if you're cheated by a random bloke you met on the street who sells you a second-hand car, there's a limit to the reputational damage you can do. Whereas if the Mercedes Corporation sells you a dodgy car, you can embarrass them into doing something about it, okay? Because they've got reputational sunk cost investment. That does apply at the individual level as well. In other words, the likelihood that it would get into pop bitch, I guess, if I did something absolutely atrocious. I did have a friend who was invited to go on what's it called? Gogglebox. And I did say 2 warnings, okay? If you do that, don't have an extramarital affair and don't lose your license. Don't get caught drunk driving, okay?